Racist cops arrest. Black man, their faces drop when they learn. He's the police chief. They thought they had just stopped a harmless black man. They had no idea that the man they pulled over was the one running their entire police department. An intense, riveting story is about to unfold. To follow it to the end, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any powerful, gripping tales from Black Strength Stories. It was the moment that sparked a seismic shift, when a routine traffic stop inadvertently placed an entire system under the scrutiny of justice. Late Tuesday night, at approximately 9:46 p.m., Clinton Enda, a 50-year-old black man, standing 6 feet tall with a solid build, had just concluded a closed-door meeting that lasted over 3 hours with community leaders in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. The meeting focused on strategies to de-escalate tensions between the police and black residents in 3 western neighborhoods of the city, where civilian complaints against law enforcement had risen by 17% in the past 6 months. With his calm demeanor, Clinton stepped out of the conference hall and returned to what he thought would be an ordinary night. His 2022 black Toyota Avalon, inspected just 3 weeks earlier, quietly cruised down Sycamore Avenue, a serene street lit by soft streetlights. The speedometer read 29 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone. No phone in hand, no music playing, no traffic violations. He wore a light gray dress shirt and a simple khaki jacket, its collar slightly wrinkled after a long day. In the passenger seat rested a brown leather briefcase filled with meeting documents and an internal reform proposal. No one, not even Clinton, could have predicted that just minutes later, he would no longer be in control of the driver's seat. Red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror. The siren's wail pierced the night, prompting him to grip the wheel tighter. Without panic or haste, Clinton calmly signaled right and pulled over beneath a shedding maple tree. Again? He sighed quietly, his seasoned hand resting on the steering wheel, eyes focused straight ahead. Seconds later, 2 white officers approached. The first, early 30s, named Dante, walked briskly to the driver's side window, flashlight in hand, sweeping across the car. No greeting, no stated reason. "Where are you rushing off to?" His voice was dry, already presuming Clinton was guilty of something. Clinton, unsurprised, replied evenly, "I'm just heading home. No speeding, no broken lights. My car's fully registered." The response didn't seem to matter. The flashlight lingered unusually long on Clinton's face, probing his calm eyes, before moving across the dashboard, glove compartment, and passenger seat, as if hoping to discover a packet of white powder. Behind the car, the second officer, Jethro, broad-shouldered, leaned against the Avalon's rear, one hand casually resting on his holstered weapon. His gaze wasn't investigative. It was a warning. "I don't smell alcohol. Nothing seems off," Clinton said. "There's a dash cam installed. It'll show clearly I did nothing wrong." Dante scoffed. "Camera, huh? That'll be confiscated. Part of the investigation." Clinton didn't respond. In that instant, he knew he wasn't speaking to law enforcement. He was facing a mindset. And perhaps, if he hadn't had his position, his experience, or his calm, someone else could have been crushed by that moment. But Clinton Enda wasn't someone else. He was the man in charge of the very system they thought they could manipulate. And they had just pulled over the wrong person. Completely the wrong person. Clinton Enda unfastened his seatbelt with deliberate, measured movements, like an old soldier performing a familiar ritual on a battlefield he knew by heart. He raised both hands slowly, spreading them under the faint glow of the police car's lights, palms facing forward. Not just a sign of submission, but a fragile shield between him and the gun, silently trembling behind his back. "Make no sudden moves. Don't resist. Don't argue," Clinton reminded himself. In over 30 years working in security forces, From internal affairs investigator to state strategic advisor, he had taught those exact principles to hundreds of young officers. But tonight, he was the one being instructed by two men he had once warned the system never to hire. Less than 3 seconds after he opened his car door, Officer Dante stepped in and yanked his arm backward with such force that he heard a faint pop in his right wrist. A sharp pain shot up to his shoulder, but he didn't scream, just clenched his teeth. "Resisting, huh? You're done now," Dante growled, pinning one knee into his back to hold him down. Clinton braced himself with his other knee, trying not to be slammed onto the damp, hot pavement of Sycamore Avenue. From the second-floor balcony of a white-painted house, a middle-aged man peeked out, eyes wide, phone in hand, seemingly ready to record the incident. Then he pulled back inside and shut the window, steeped in the silence of someone far too accustomed to scenes like this. Meanwhile, Jethro opened the rear patrol car door and shoved Clinton hard into the back seat. The door slammed shut with a cold finality, like the end of a rushed trial. Clinton sat upright, trying to steady his breath. With his hands cuffed behind him, he leaned slightly forward, left shoulder burning from the violent arm twist. Outside, the dashboard clock read 10:12 p.m. The car began moving toward the Riverside District Police Headquarters, the very building where Clinton had been appointed chief of police just 3 weeks earlier. But in the eyes of Dante and Jethro, he was nothing more than a suspicious black guy driving a nice car at night. "You people think wearing decent clothes and driving a fancy car hides everything, huh?" Jethro said over his shoulder, locking eyes with Clinton in the rearview mirror. Driving around at 10 p.m., dressed like a wannabe exec, but no suit, probably just dropped off some illegal delivery, Dante added, chewing gum loudly as he steered. Clinton didn't respond. He knew his silence irritated them more than anything he could say. "I'm just someone trying to live in peace," he replied gently, without bitterness, without provocation. Jethro laughed loudly. "Guys like you always say that. But there's always something dirty in the trunk. I bet that dash cam is full of shady stuff you've been doing." Clinton turned his head and looked out the window. The red flashing lights of the patrol car blurred on the wet pavement, moistened by an automatic sprinkler system. In his mind, the pain in his wrist wasn't the only thing throbbing. There was calculation. He was memorizing every expression, every word, every detail, like an investigator taking notes at a crime scene. This wasn't an accident. This was a system of abuse functioning exactly as designed, and he had just been pulled into its mechanism, not as a victim, but as a catalyst. Clinton knew one thing for certain. What happened tonight wouldn't end in a holding cell. It would ripple across the city. And if he could hold on to his clarity and honor, this very place would become the starting point for setting right a generation in uniform that had forgotten what responsibility means. The patrol car turned into the rear lot of the Riverside District Police Station at 10:37 p.m. The automated iron gate opened with a clattering sound, like a drum roll welcoming an arrest that the two officers believed was worth it. It wasn't a bank robber, nor a gun runner, just a middle-aged black man driving an expensive car in a quiet neighborhood. But to Officer Dante and Jethro, that was enough. Clinton Endo was escorted through the brightly lit hallway, on legs still numb. His hands remained cuffed behind his back all the way to the holding cell door. No one asked his name. No one requested identification. Not even the desk sergeant paused to verify the identity of the person being brought in. Everything was assumed. Definitely guilty. Dante removed the cuffs, sneering as he did. "Welcome to your new home. Hope you get used to the moldy smell." Clinton kept a composed expression. "What charges am I being held under?" he asked, his voice steady, neither trembling nor submissive. Jethro, who stood over 6 feet 3 inches, leaned against the desk casually, as if he had just finished watching a game. "We'll think of something fitting later. Maybe weapons possession, or threatening a cop. Who knows?" he said, half joking, half serious. Both burst into laughter as they opened Clinton's wallet to check his ID. His card clearly read, "Clinton Enda, age 50, legal resident of North Carolina." But the name didn't trigger anything for them. Dante's eyes skimmed over it and folded it back, showing no hint of recognition. "No priors? That's surprising," Dante mocked. "Guys like this usually have at least one petty theft or fare evasion charge." "Keep digging," Jethro nodded. "People like him always have some dirt in the past. If he's clean, the sky must be falling." While the two officers continued their banter, Clinton was led into a small holding cell at the end of the hallway. The 4x6-meter room had walls yellowed from moisture, a metal bench welded to the wall, and a toilet with no door. The flickering fluorescent light above gave the scene the feel of a low-budget thriller. He sat on the bench, hands clasped, not from shaking, but to keep his breathing steady. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't angry. He had witnessed hundreds of such cases, but never as the central figure in the script. Now, he was analyzing every detail as an investigator, not a victim. Through the bars, a few young officers passed by, glancing at him. No one recognized him. Of course, Clinton had only been appointed chief of police less than 22 days ago. His portrait had just gone up in the boardroom last week. Most of the staff hadn't yet met him in person. One young officer in a dark blue uniform skimmed the name on the intake file. His eyes passed over Clinton Enda, then shifted to his phone without hesitation. To them, he was just another statistic in tonight's arrest log. But Clinton was different. He was recording every action, every word, every procedural violation, from the failure to read his Miranda rights, the absence of record checks, to the excessive use of force. All of it was being arranged like puzzle pieces in his mind, because he knew that time would do its work. In just a few hours, the name Clinton Enda would echo through emergency meetings, morning broadcasts, and internal reports. And the two men swaggering outside would learn the most costly lesson of their lives: never judge a man by his skin color, especially when that man holds the highest authority they've ever dared to disrespect. 6:17 a.m. The first light of dawn spilled through the large glass windows of the Riverside District Police Headquarters, casting a pale golden streak across the cold granite floor. In the heavy silence of early morning, a pair of black heels echoed firmly down the long hallway. A woman stepped in, dressed in a crisply pressed uniform, a polished brass nameplate gleaming under the ceiling light. Lieutenant Elilas. Elilas was one of the 3 highest-ranking female officers in the state of North Carolina. 44 years old, of Puerto Rican descent, she was known not only for her impressive record of case resolutions, but also for her zero-tolerance stance on any signs of abuse of power within the force. And this morning, she had been summoned from command headquarters after a temporary intake record listed the name of a detainee as Clinton Enda. No coffee. No greetings. Elilas walked straight to the front desk and lightly tapped a folder against the counter. "Who arrested Mr. Clinton Enda last night?" she asked, her voice firm, not loud, but with the weight of a hammer striking concrete. An on-duty officer pointed toward the booking room. Dante was leaning against the copy machine, halfway through a sandwich, when he saw Elilas appear. His face paled slightly, but he tried to maintain composure. "We did, ma'am." The subject was driving recklessly and being uncooperative. Elilas didn't respond immediately. She nodded slowly, then asked, "Did you file the report?" "Not yet. We're still finalizing the paperwork," Dante replied, his voice trailing off. "Where's the evidence?" Her gaze was sharp as a blade. "Dashcam? Audio? Witness statements?" Jethro, who had just stepped out from the break room, interjected. We haven't reviewed the footage yet. But in that moment, it felt right. He was acting hostile. Feelings aren't evidence, Elilas responded, turning to look through the bulletproof glass toward the solitary holding cell. Clinton Enda sat on the stone bench, hands clasped, back straight, eyes raised, as if calmly awaiting something. There was no sign of panic or fear. Elilas. Clinton called her name gently, like greeting an old acquaintance, though Elilas had only met him once before, at the appointment ceremony just 3 weeks ago. He had a dash cam, didn't he? She asked, eyes still fixed on him. Yes, that's what he said, Jethro answered. Get it? Now! Her tone was that of a battlefield command. Call the tech team, back up all the data, and you two, in my office. Immediately. Dante swallowed hard. His eyes started to dart. The collar of his uniform felt suffocating, though the AC was set at 72 degrees. Jethro wiped his forehead. Sweat was clearly visible along the strap of his duty hat, hanging at his belt. Clinton rose from the bench, adjusted the wrinkled collar of his shirt, and looked toward Elilas. Thank you for following proper procedure, he said, not sarcastically, not angrily, just as a calm reminder from someone who knew the law better than anyone else in the building. Lieutenant Elilas gave a slight nod, saying nothing. But in her mind, every piece of the puzzle began locking into place. The name on the intake, the strange behavior of the 2 officers, the skipped background check. All signs were pointing toward something seriously wrong. As the door to the command office shut behind the 3 of them, the air in the station seemed to thin. Other officers began murmuring. They didn't know exactly what was unfolding, but one thing was clear. 2 among them had just entered a meeting with a commanding officer, and no one expected them to come out the same. Clinton remained in the holding cell, but his position had shifted. The atmosphere no longer belonged to a man under arrest. The technical surveillance room on the 2nd floor of the Riverside Police Department headquarters was a narrow space with 4 large screens and a complex control panel used to analyze dashcams, body cams, and internal drone footage. At 6:51 a.m., Lieutenant Elilas stood before the central screen, arms crossed, her face betraying a stern, unwavering composure. A technician named Martin, 29 years old, bespectacled, with over 5 years of experience in the imaging unit, inserted the memory card from Clinton's dashcam into the reader. He had already heard whispers from his colleagues over the past 30 minutes. But when the footage began to play, Martin's doubts vanished. The screen displayed the view from the front of Clinton's car, the empty stretch of Sycamore Avenue, the car moving at a steady 29 miles per hour in a 35 zone, a clear turn signal blinking as Clinton pulled to the curb. Audio from inside the car recorded him muttering, "Stay calm, hands on the wheel." Lieutenant Elilas said nothing. She simply nodded and signaled to switch to Officer Dante's body cam. The audio came on immediately. A heavy breath sounded from Dante's chest mic, followed by a low voice. Another one stirring up trouble in this neighborhood. Then Jethro's mocking reply, "Let's just grab him fast." It's late. I'm not in the mood for a long report. The next shot showed Dante flashing his light in Clinton's face, scanning quickly to the passenger seat, then signaling Jethro to close in from behind. Clinton spoke up, his tone calm, but every word deliberate. I'm reaching for my vehicle registration from the glove compartment. My left hand remains on the wheel. My wallet is in my back right pocket. I'll move slowly. Dante gave no reply. In the video, he looked at Clinton like he was listening to a dog barking in the middle of the night. The next moment showed Jethro rushing in, opening the door, pulling Clinton out even as he continued narrating each movement. Clinton did not resist. No aggressive words, no threatening gestures. Just a middle-aged man trying to survive in a system that made no room for composure. "Pause it there," Elilas commanded. The room fell into a silence as heavy as a cemetery. She turned around to look at Dante and Jethro standing behind her, fists clenched, shoulders rigid. Dante tried to speak, his voice strained, as he attempted to appear composed. It was pretty dark out. I couldn't see clearly. Couldn't see his skin color, or couldn't see his dignity? Elilas cut him off, her tone cold as stone. Jethro shifted his foot, about to step back, but froze. She pointed straight at the screen. This is a textbook case of abuse of power. And you two are the face of why the public has lost faith in this force. No one dared to respond. She turned to Martin. Back up all footage in triplicate. 1 to the Internal Affairs Division, 1 to the Civil Review Board. And I'll personally deliver the last to the Chief Justice. Understood, Martin replied, already typing the print command. Elilas walked toward Clinton, who was seated just outside the surveillance room. He remained composed, hands folded, back straight, his gaze showing not a trace of anger. His face in that moment looked like it had been carved from granite, resolute and indestructible. I'm releasing you immediately, Elilas said. This matter will be handled properly. Clinton offered a slight smile. I know you'll do the right thing. But I think we should have a longer conversation. Elilas gave a slight nod, asking nothing more. She understood. Clinton Enda wasn't merely a man falsely arrested. He was the symbol of a system in need of reckoning. And in that moment, for the first time in the long morning, Elilas felt time shift. Not the time of silence, but the time of reckoning. 8:15 a.m., 3 days after the arrest. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse was packed with people, from the hallways to the front lawn. Local and national media crowded outside. 3 major television networks, WSOC-TV, WBTV, and CNN Southeast, had set up temporary tents. On Twitter, the hashtags #ClintonEnda, #wrongful arrest, and #Justice in Charlotte all trended regionally. A dark charcoal SUV stopped in front of the courthouse, the door opened, and Clinton Enda stepped out, accompanied by his attorney, Nanito Larke, a black woman in her 40s, tall and slender, her braided hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck. She had once been a federal prosecutor, before turning her focus to defending victims of racial discrimination. People called her the scalpel of speech, because she never needed to shout or slam tables. Yet her arguments were always precise, sharp, and left the deepest wounds before her opponents even realized they had been cut. Clinton walked past the swarm of reporters in silence, nodding only to a young boy holding up a sign that read, "Stand with Truth." A peaceful moment amid the political storm sparked by his case. Inside the courtroom, Dante and Jethro were already present. Dante looked around nervously, his face paling upon hearing that the dashcam and body cam footage would be played directly for the jury. Beside him, Jethro leaned back in his seat, trying to maintain composure, but the sweat spreading from his neck down the back of his shirt clung to him like a second skin he couldn't peel off. Presiding Judge Paul Westerfield, a stern 67-year-old white man, entered the courtroom and declared, "Public hearing is now in session. Prosecution may present its charges." A young prosecutor, early 30s, stepped forward and began. The defendant, Clinton Enda, was arrested for unsafe driving, failure to signal while changing lanes, and exhibiting signs of non-compliance during a routine stop. He didn't get to finish his statement before Nanito stood up. Her voice wasn't loud, but no one in the courtroom failed to turn their heads. "Your Honor, I will demonstrate clearly that everything just stated is untrue and is a direct result of racially biased abuse of authority. Permission to present evidence." The signal switched to the large screen. Nanito didn't narrate. The footage spoke for itself. First, the dashcam. Clinton drove steadily at 29 miles per hour. Clear turn signal, no swerving. Then the body cam footage. Officer Dante approaching Clinton's vehicle, a blinding flashlight beam, his mocking voice saying, "Another one stirring up trouble?" Gasps erupted from the gallery. Some jurors shook their heads, and two black women in the third row gripped each other's hands tightly. Jethro appeared in the next clip, his voice cold as steel. "Let's just grab him quick." Then came footage of Clinton raising his hands, narrating each of his movements. "I'm reaching for the registration from the glove compartment. Left hand stays put. Wallet's in the back pocket. I will move slowly." Nanito paused the video. She turned to the jury. "Did any of you see conduct that warranted forceful restraint, handcuffing without being read rights, and being shoved into a patrol car like a criminal?" No one responded. She continued, her voice lower but sharper. "The issue was never the car. It wasn't the lane. The issue was the skin color." The judge gestured for the prosecution's rebuttal, but they offered no further argument. At that moment, the last person asked to stand was Clinton. He rose slowly, adjusted his collar. His voice rang out, not trembling, not confrontational, but as an undeniable declaration. "I am Clinton Enda, the chief of police of this city, appointed 3 weeks ago, and I chose not to reveal that when I was arrested, because I needed to see the truth, not the privilege." Another wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. A man in the back row whispered, "Oh my God!" Dante lowered his head. Jethro stared down at his hands, unable to lift his gaze. Clinton looked toward the two men who had bound him like a stray animal, and said, "I don't need fear from men like you. I need them to understand. Power isn't in the badge. It's in how we treat those with the least of it." Clinton Enda's declaration was like a bomb detonating in the courtroom. The air felt torn apart in an instant. A moment seemed to stretch longer than real time. The jury froze. The prosecutor dropped his pen. A white woman in the second row raised her hand to cover her mouth. But the two quietest people were Dante and Jethro. Dante, pale-faced, hunched over, his hands clasped together, trembling under the table. Jethro sat frozen, eyes wide open, throat gulping down drops of fear. Clinton looked directly at them, his eyes not filled with anger, but with determination. "I didn't say I was the chief of police because I wanted to see how you'd behave when you thought I was no one." That statement wasn't retaliation. It was a mirror, and the two of them saw their reflections clearly, distorted, toxic, and deeply aggressive. Attorney Nanito stood, turned to the public gallery, and said, her voice echoing through the solemn courtroom, "No one is exempt from responsibility just because they wear a uniform. A uniform is a symbol of duty, not a license to abuse." The media pounced like a storm without warning. Within just 20 minutes after the hearing ended, 6 local newspapers had already run bold headlines. "Police chief wrongfully arrested. Incident shocks the entire city." The CBS Charlotte noon broadcast opened with footage of Clinton Enda stepping out of the courthouse, flashes from cameras bursting like New Year's Eve. Over the video, hashtags exploded. Number Justice for Clinton, number Enda Speaks, number Wrong Man Right Fight, number Police Reform Now. In just 3 hours, the hashtag number Justice for Clinton surpassed 1.2 million mentions on Twitter, spreading to Canada, the UK, and South Africa. Inside the courtroom, Judge Westerfield gently tapped his gavel and stated firmly, "The court dismisses all charges. Additionally, the county's Internal Affairs Office is ordered to initiate an independent investigation into the actions of Officers Dante and Jethro. The investigation is filed under Code 21-7904-INT. Court is adjourned." That gavel strike echoed like the final beat of a long-running, deceitful play. But for Clinton, it was not the end. It was the call to begin a far longer journey. As he stepped through the courthouse gates, he did not raise his fist in victory, nor did he smile in triumph. Instead, he stood among a forest of microphones and lenses, the collar of his shirt still wrinkled from the morning, his gaze steady and his voice calm. This case isn't just about me. It's about a system I'm trying to fix from within. I don't need to become a victim to be noticed. I need you, the citizens of this city, to become allies in reform. A reporter asked, "Do you plan to sue the two officers?" Clinton replied simply, "I don't want to end anyone's career. I want to end a culture of recklessness, lack of oversight, and unaccountability." An unusual response, logical, yet striking the deepest chords of conscience. He spoke not in the name of vengeance, but in the name of reform. And as Clinton turned and walked to his car, those standing along the sidewalk offered light applause, not because he was a victim, but because he was someone who dared to speak up from a position where silence would have been more comfortable. Yet, the silence he refused that day ignited another flame. A wave of outrage began to ripple across the community, not just to defend Clinton Enda, but to reclaim dignity for all those without titles, without dash cams, and without a chance to speak for themselves. The morning after the hearing, at 8:03, an internal announcement was sent from the Charlotte City Police Chief's office to the entire force, including over 2,400 officers, investigators, civilian specialists, and regional supervisors. The message was brief. Officer Dante Levitt and Officer Jethro Miles are suspended indefinitely pending criminal investigation. All related operations are halted, access cards temporarily revoked. Clinton Enda hadn't waited for anyone to act. Less than 12 hours after he walked out of court, his position as police chief had already begun turning the gears of a machine that had long grown stagnant. Within 24 hours of the courtroom verdict, the city police department received over 940 emails and 312 direct phone calls from citizens demanding the immediate dismissal of the two involved officers and urging a broader investigation into other questionable arrests in the past 6 months. But the outrage didn't stop at keystrokes or voicemails. That same evening, nearly 500 people gathered in front of police headquarters, carrying signs that read, "We haven't forgotten Clinton Enda. I could be next," and "No camera, no justice." They didn't scream. They didn't riot. They stood still, candlelight in hand, illuminating faces of all skin tones, all ages, all professions. An elderly woman whispered to a news camera, "If they treated Clinton like that, my son will never be safe on the street." The next morning, Clinton convened an emergency all-hands meeting in the department's main hall, a room last used to host a retirement farewell. He stepped onto the podium, no microphone needed. His voice was low and slow, but carried clearly to the last row. "You can say you're sorry, but I don't need apologies. I need changed behavior." Below, nearly 600 officers, from beat cops to rapid response teams, sat in suffocating silence. No one had ever seen Clinton angry, and today he still wasn't. But every word he uttered carried the weight of a system being laid bare. Starting next week, every officer, including command staff, will attend a new training module, Unconscious Bias Prevention. It won't just be theory. Field exercises, psychological evaluations, and 6-month recertifications will follow. Murmurs rippled through the room. And in addition, he continued, we are launching an anonymous internal complaint system, overseen by an independent board, including attorneys, human rights experts, and community representatives. Every complaint will be logged. None will be deleted, even if dismissed. Within 48 hours, major television networks aired talk shows titled, "When Police Fear Cameras More Than the Law." The broadcasts brought in experts, former officers, and activists to debate. Citizens called in, sent messages, shared their opinions. Clinton was invited to speak at 3 major police academies: the FBI National Academy, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and Northwestern University Center for Public Safety. They wanted him to share his leadership insights after a nation-shaking legal case. He declined them all. "I don't have time to lecture from afar," he said. "I need to act right here, where blood has been spilled and trust has been broken." That day, there were no standing ovations, no live broadcasts, only quiet, forceful decisions, just like the man himself, and like the message he was sending to all of America. The most effective protest isn't a complaint, it's organized action. 1 week after the court concluded the case, Clinton Enda stepped into a different space. Not a courtroom, not police headquarters, but a community center nestled in the Beechwood neighborhood on the east side of Charlotte. There, he attended the first town hall meeting since becoming a national focal point. Nearly 300 residents filled the seats, from single mothers, young entrepreneurs, and veterans, to local social activists. A simple white banner hung on the wall. No more silence, no more fear. Clinton wasn't there to deliver a speech. He sat in the second row. No podium, no fancy audio system. Just a wireless microphone passed hand to hand. The first to speak was an elderly woman over 70, her voice trembling. "I've lived here since 1968. I watched my son get arrested just for walking at the wrong time. You're the first person in law enforcement I've ever felt like listening to." A young female student stood up. "We don't need more promises. We need action, and the accountability that must come with it." Clinton nodded silently. By the 6th speaker, a boy around 15, wearing a dark blue hoodie, stood up. He hesitated, but his voice rang out across the hall's breath-held silence. "Mr. Clinton." That could have been me. No one moved. Clinton left his seat and walked over to hug the boy. It wasn't dramatic, but it was profound. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, eyes turning to the crowd. "If I, with over 30 years in this job, with the title of police chief, could barely survive a single night crushed by bias, then kids like him will carry that weight their whole lives, unless we do something now." No one clapped, but dozens of eyes welled with tears. Clinton sat down with everyone else, never returning to the leadership chair. He shared what had already been implemented. The mandatory unconscious bias training had launched, with 138 officers in the first round. The internal complaint system had received 17 reports in just 5 days, 6 of which were under independent investigation. A new code of ethics was being drafted, not by the legal department, but by publicly elected community representatives. A local pastor proposed, "Officers should join monthly community activities without their uniforms, so people see they're human." A young business owner added, "Create scholarships for Black students interested in law or policing, so we can change things at the root." Clinton took note of every line, every detail. He didn't make empty promises, didn't nod to appease. He simply said, "I'll bring this to the board meeting next week." Internal stats revealed a 22% drop in police applications after the incident. But notably, the number of applicants who passed ethics, critical thinking, and community service mindset evaluations rose by 37%. Clinton called it the natural filter of truth. He also ordered the review of more than 4,300 arrest records from the past 2 years, prioritizing cases involving minorities, the homeless, and juveniles. Initial results: 14 cases dismissed for procedural violations, 3 officers officially reprimanded, and 1 individual released after nearly 8 months of wrongful detention. people began to trust again, not because of what Clinton said, but because of what they saw him do. But he knew better than anyone. This fight wouldn't end with a speech or a trial. It was only beginning. With every shift, every patrol, every decision made beyond public view. And if he wanted to change an entire culture, he'd have to fight. Not as a politician, but as a soldier for justice, from within his own force. The case of Clinton Enda wasn't just a personal ordeal. It was a mirror reflecting the entire law enforcement system, where skin color sometimes outweighed reason. When a man with over 3 decades of service can still be crushed by prejudice, we must ask, what happens to those without power, without cameras, without a voice? But the point isn't the outrage. What must be remembered is how Clinton responded, with action, with reform, and with quiet determination. He didn't seek fame for being wronged. He chose to be the first to break the cycle from within. That battle isn't over. It's only just begun. And if you're watching, don't just be a spectator. Speak up. Stand on the side of justice. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Black Strength Stories, so you don't miss more true, powerful, and moving stories like this, where we share the undeniable strength of Black resilience through truth that never flinches.